Welcome back. We got 10 more common Magic the Gathering cards to talk about today because it's common knowledge. That's what we do on the show. We tell you, are they good in the Pauper format, or if they're just regular garbage common cards. Most of them are regular garbage common cards, but what can you do? Let's see what our first card is. Maybe it's not garbage. It's Shelter. 1 and a white for an instant. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn, and you draw a card. Well, the drawn card's okay. 2 mana for a card draw. The real issue, we have protection spells in the Pauper format that are cheaper than 2 mana. We've certainly got them for 1 mana. There's like Loran's Escape. Yep. So we have that. That gives you hexproof and indestructible, which is not exactly protection, but it's pretty darn close. And you get a Scry for just a single mana. You know, a drawn card is certainly better than a Scry. Is it worth the extra mana to do it? Maybe. Could be. But we also have... what is the name of the card? Do I have that off the top here? I was actually just looking at one of my decks that I thought used it. No, it no longer uses it. Damn, it's the white Phyrexian card. It's a Phyrexian mana, so you can pay the 2 life and get that for even cheaper, and that gives protection. So some people use that instead as a good piece to use, because you can pay the white mana or the 2 life, which means you can play it in any deck, honestly, because you can kind of always pay the 2 life. Still, though, drawing the card's kind of nice. I don't think Shelter is terrible. Originally from Odyssey, so cool, nice old card. And, I would say it's more or less held its value. And I don't mean value as in, it's still a quarter or less to buy this card. I mean, although I do want to see, these Mikus, that's why. Like, why are these so expensive? Miku, of course. But I think it's held its value in terms of a Magic card. You see a lot of cards that get power crept out of the format. I don't think Shelter has quite gotten power crept because of that ability to draw a card. And I think when you have 2 mana, you're giving 1 creature a protection, and you're drawing a card, that's a halfway good deal. Still, though, it's not really played in Pauper at this point. I think you generally will end up taking the downsides of something like the Phyrexian spell that loses you 2 life, or something like the Loran's Escape, which doesn't draw you a card, but at least it does give you the protection you need, and it's much cheaper. So you'll take those more narrow times than you will with this. But I will point out, you can use protection in an offensive way as well, and that's pretty cool. That is a nice thing. It's not something you'd get with Loran's Escape. I guess you can use it offensively in that you give your creature indestructible, and then they don't trade anymore. Use it as a combat trick in that way. But Shelter, you can use pre-combat or pre-blocks anyway, and give your creature protection from whatever color the opponent has the most creatures of, or if all their creatures are a single color, then you just say, I give protection from red, and they have a bunch of red creatures, and you just swing in and they can't block them, because that's one of the other things protection does. So I like Shelter. I think Shelter's a good card. Doesn't see a whole lot of Pauper play, probably will not see a whole lot of Pauper play, but will always just generally be a good, solid Magic card. I think this is a perfect cube card. Just if you want to have some old school, this is Magic, baby, Shelter's a pretty good card for that. I'm going to end up giving this thing like a 3.9. I could even see bumping it up to 4. Yeah, I'll bump it up to 4. It's just a good card. Just a good card. What's our next card? Is that going to be a good card? We'll see. It's Barb Sextant. Ooh, this is kind of a little spicy one here. Barb Sextant's a single mana for an artifact. You can pay 1 and tap and sacrifice this artifact to add 1 mana of any color. You draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So this is, we call these eggs. And there are a bunch of eggs out there. We see, oh goodness, chromatic. Well, I could just write in chromatic because we're going to see a couple. I have to write chromatic correctly, though. That's very important. But you see Chromatic Sphere, same type of deal. In fact, pretty much exactly the same as Barb Sextant, except you draw the card at instant speed. You don't have to wait to draw the card like Barb Sextant does. Chromatic Star, pretty darn similar. When it goes into the graveyard, you draw a card, so it's essentially the same. It's pretty darn close. But when you have these, and now you have 8 of these kind of effects, do you really need copies 9 through 12? And generally no, but I have seen some decks, some fringy kind of decks that have played like a complete eggs style deck, and they just want as many of these as possible. So now if you do have 12 of them in your deck, you can do a lot of really weird and interesting things, getting back 1-drops. Think about all the maybe not all the things, but the Leonin Squire at least. Leonin Squire gets an artifact that costs 1 back to your hand. So that's a way of grabbing any of those guys back and getting even more card advantage and even more color fixing for any of the stuff that you need to do. Let's think about a card like, I gotta not have caps lock on, Fangren Marauder. When an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, yours or your opponent's, by the way, you gain 5 life. This goes directly to your graveyard. That's 5 life and a drawn card. And if you have 12 of these effects, that's a lot of life you're gaining. And if you have the Leonin Squire that's bringing them back, that's even more. The Mirror Retriever, does Mirror Retriever just take artifacts, or is it just creatures? I think it might just be creatures. No, it's artifacts. So yeah, the Mirror Retriever, you can start doing combo-y kind of decks, Alter Tron-y style decks. There's all sorts of things you can do. Again, Barb Sextant is the worst of these because you have to wait until the opponent's turn. Well, I guess not the opponent's. It could be your turn if you crack this on your opponent's turn. But you have to wait until the next turn's upkeep, as it says here, to get the card. That makes it worse than the stars and the spheres. But there are decks that will want as many of these cards as possible, as many of these effects as possible. And for those decks, you still have Barb Sextant, and they'll use it. So I'm going to give this like a really fringy. It's so fringe that I don't want to give it anything in the 5s, because that's kind of where we go, oh, that's Pauper playable. You might see that in like a quote-unquote normal, regular Pauper deck. So I don't think you really see it enough to give it a 5 range, but I think I could give this, if I'm gonna give Shelter a 4, I guess I'm gonna give this a 4.1. I was thinking 3.9 or 4.1, but I think we can give this a 4.1. Cool card. Glad we got to see it. Originally from Ice Age. I was gonna say Pro Tour Collector set. I don't know what the Pro Tour Collector set is. That's not like a World Champ deck, but it has the same border as a World Champ deck, so I don't know. I didn't know it was in the Cold Snap theme decks. That's fun. I guess I never got a Cold Snap theme deck. No, that's not true. I do have a Cold Snap theme deck. Maybe I just didn't get the right one. Anyway, what is our next card going to be? Monstrous Emergence. Okay, 1 and a green for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, choose a creature you control or reveal a creature card from your hand. Monstrous Emergence deals damage equal to the power of the creature you chose or the card you revealed to target creature. This is from Duskmourn. And you know what? This has turned out to be a pretty cool card. You'll see this in some Monster Tron style decks. We were just talking about Tron before, but in a different style of Tron deck. Because we used to play, and we still do. You see Ram Through played in quite a few decks still. Ram Through, pretty good, and also at instant speed, so you can't take that for granted. But Ram Through does some good. It does the kind of instant speed bite effect that you're looking for, but it also could potentially give you a little extra here. So we still play Ram Through, but Monstrous Emergence has become a really interesting one because one of the problems with a card like Ram Through or any of these bite or fight effects is that when you try to play one of those, your opponent has the opportunity to respond, and they can kill the creature that you're targeting on your side. That, hey, this guy is going to bite that guy, and they can throw down a cast down and say, actually, your guy's dead, so my guy lives. You know, you're not. It's not like a red spell where you're doing direct damage to that creature. Or it's not like a black spell where you're just outright destroying that creature. You have to have a thing to be able to do a thing. And Monstrous Emergence kind of gets around that, because you could still use it as a normal bite effect, and that works just fine. But you can also reveal a card, or reveal a creature card from your hand, and at that point, what can they do? You know, they I guess unless they have. No, yeah, they couldn't even use an instant speed discard effect, which would be very difficult to do anyway. There's some ways in Pauper to instant speed make somebody discard, but even in that case, because now it's the card you revealed, so that is a way. You know, imagine you're playing like a Monstertron deck. You've got an Ulamog's Crusher that's an 8/8, and now you can play Monstrous Emergence on turn 2, a turn where you wouldn't be able to have had that Ulamog's Crusher on the table. But now you can reveal that Ulamog's Crusher, which is giving your opponent some information, but they can't interact with your ability now to do 8 damage to their guy. That's pretty cool. That's a trick that green didn't really have before, and now it does. And I think that's a really nice way of adding value to these bite and fight effects. I guess just bite effects in this. You couldn't do the fight because it's a card in your hand. It doesn't take damage that way. But I think that's an interesting design space for green to now have some access to, where it isn't just, all these removal spells are terrible because all your creatures will just get ice before they even get a chance to do the fight, do the bite. But now you can keep it in your hand and hit them like that. This is a good card. I have a couple copies in my Monstertron deck, but you will see this in a number of other green decks as well, especially like mono green decks might play a couple of these in the sideboard just as a way of, you know, using the big creatures to your advantage. You're not going to see it in elves, right? But you're going to see it in a lot of like big stompy green decks, maybe even some Gruul ramp decks, although Gruul ramp decks will have access to red, so most of the times they don't need to do a big fight spell. Because they can just do the direct damage spell. They can just play Lightning Bolt. But yeah, if you're playing mostly just green, or maybe even green blue, like a Simic kind of deck, I think maybe this is a little bit more useful there. This is a pretty solid card, really solid sideboard option for you. And I think as Magic continues, they're gonna find more things that they can do with this design space. You know, maybe do this at instant speed at someday. Keep an eye on this kind of effect, because I think we'll see more of it. So for now, this card, I'm going to give a 5.6, because I think it is really good in those green decks. And it's really appreciated there. I know I appreciate it in my decks. It's 5.6. Pretty good. Bloodright Invoker is 2 and a black for a 3/1 Vampire Shaman. You can pay 8 mana and target player loses 3 life, and you gain 3 life. Have we done this Invoker before? We've done some of the Invokers on the channel, but I'm not sure if we've done a Bloodright Invoker. I'm going to give the same kind of spiel that I've given about the other Invokers, and these are infinite combo machines. If you have infinite mana, most of these Invokers can just win you the game. You know, there's the green one that can give the creature a bunch of stats and trample, which, you know, if that creature gets through for damage and you have infinite mana, you can pump it up infinite times and you can win that way. The red one just deals direct damage to an opponent at instant speed. So if you have enough mana, enough infinite mana, then you can just kill them outright that way at instant speed. The black one here is more or less the same as the red one, maybe even a little better in some ways, because you're gaining the life. So it's infinite life gain, infinite life drain from the opponent. And that's pretty good. The question is black a better color than red when you're trying to make infinite mana? And honestly, I don't really know. I don't pay attention to combo decks all that much. I'm not a big combo deck fan, but I can understand. Hey, yeah, if you if you can make an infinite mana combo, these invokers are a great way of sealing the deal. So I'll give Bloodright Invoker. I don't see it very often. And I'm trying to think of any other decks that I, see in the metagame results or things like that are playing this card. And I think you probably just have more efficient combos than this. You have cards that will do more for you outside of being a combo piece. Outside of being a combo piece, this is not a very good card. It's a 3 mana 3/1 with an activated ability you will never be able to activate unless you have infinite mana, right? So in that sense, I think a lot of people shy away from a card like this, and they would rather find, one of the newer combos that's kind of out there in Pauper is like Devoted Druid and Guac and Marshmallow Pizza and the blue cards that allow you to bounce stuff back. Again, I'm not a combo guy. I don't know all the combo stuff, but I've seen that combo work, and each of those cards is useful outside of the combo. You can use those cards for other purposes and get value out of them. And I don't think you get that with Bloodright Invoker. So it is a combo piece. It's an infinite combo piece. It can win you the game. You got to give it some respect in that way. And I am going to give it like a halfway decent score for that. But I think you also have to acknowledge that there's lots of combos out there, and some combos are more resilient than others because those cards are more useful in many different ways instead of just the one thing it can do. So I'll still give Bloodright Invoker a 4.5. Respect the infinite, but not a particularly great card outside of that. Gaseous Form is 2 and a blue for an enchantment aura that enchants a creature. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to and dealt by enchanted creature. This wasn't originally from 4th edition. It was older than that, is it? Yeah, this is a Legends card. Yeah, that makes sense. I clicked it. There we go. There you go. That's Legends. 54 cents for a Legends card. That's pretty good. No, it looks pretty good too. You got that Phil Folio art. Love Phil Folio over here. Although, this Roger Ropp art is pretty good too. Gaseous Form is fine. It's not all that amazing. We've seen lots of other kind of removal options at this point, and we have much cheaper and better options. Blossom Bind is a pretty good one from these days from Lore and Eclipsed. We have Unable to Scream from Duskmourn that does quite all right too. That only costs a single mana. It's not exactly the same. This preventing all damage that would be dealt to and dealt by enchanted creature, isn't quite as good as something that taps the creature down and they can't untap again. It's not quite as good as turning a creature into a 0/2 with no abilities. This lets the creature keep its abilities. If you have a Pactol Terror or something that you're facing, I guess you can stop it from attacking and killing any of your creatures on blocks, but it still does its thing, and its thing is pretty deadly. So that's not amazing. You really want these kinds of effects to stop the creature in their tracks, and this doesn't. It's also not at instant speed, and some of the other ones that I mentioned aren't at instant speed either, but they are cheaper than 3 mana. So 3 mana and having to play this at sorcery, main phase speed, and it doesn't really get rid of the creature. And it honestly makes that creature into an incredible blocker. This is basically like giving it indestructible, right? Because it turns it into like a Darksteel mirror. Darksteel mirror. I don't know why I did that. It's going to take forever. Darksteel mirror's 0/1 indestructible mirror. That's all you need to know. And when this finally kicks in, you're going to see that. But that's basically what this thing, Gaseous Form, does. Because now your creature that the opponent has doesn't say that it can't attack or block. It can still attack or block. It just can't deal damage, and it can't take damage. There you go. There's my boy. which is, it's about as good as a Darksteel Mirror. And Darksteel Mirror is an uncommon, so slightly different, but I don't think this is very good removal when we have so many other kind of removal style options that will tap the creature down or just cheaper. We've just gone over those. So what do we give this? I think you give it like a I'm gonna give it a 2.4, I think. It does remove a creature in a way, and blue doesn't have a ton of ways of doing that. But I don't think this is necessarily a great one. All right, let's keep going. Hoarding Recluse is 3 and a green for a 2/3 spider with reach and death touch. Oh, interesting. When this creature dies, put up to one other target card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. Yeah, that's not particularly great, is it? They kind of tried to make a giant spider here, and then they took a point of toughness off it. You don't love that. And they did give it death touch, so death touch, I guess I can see why it has less toughness then. You don't want it to be able to block so many things and kill them because of the death touch. So now, maybe it's more likely that this thing trades in combat rather than blocking and living and killing with the death touch. So I get that. This other skill here, when it dies, put up to one target card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. That's not that great. I mean, you'd want to be able to do that. I guess you can kill something or sacrifice this at instant speed to take, the opponent's card that they're trying to grab from, I don't know, Blood Fountain or something, and you put that on the bottom of their deck, or Exhume. They try to use Exhume or something, and you sacrifice this, and you put the Troll of Khazad-dûm at the bottom of their deck instead. Yeah, that's cute, but we just have better graveyard hate options. You could also potentially use this as a way of putting your cards from your graveyard into your library. But again, it goes at the bottom of your library, so it's not like you have a really good shot of getting it again. This is not a very good card. I think I'm going to give this a... And the reach and death touch helps it out a lot, but it does cost 4 mana for that privilege. You're not going to get this on the table for a while, and even when you do, you've paid 4 mana for basically just a defensive creature. And when it dies, you don't really get a very good effect out of it. I don't particularly like this. I'm going to give it a 2, and just a flat 2. Just a flat 2. Next up is Chameleon Blur for 3 and a green. You get an instant. Prevent all damage that creatures would deal to players this turn. That's really bad. That's a... Okay, so it's just a fog... I mean, it's not just a fog effect. It's actually very specific in the way that it's a fog effect. So I want to give it its due here. But you do have to start any conversation about a card like this by saying, Fog's 1 mana. Fog's a single green mana, and they want 4 mana for this. So this has to be way better than a Fog. And is it? Because Fog prevents all damage creatures would deal at all. To any creature. To any player, to a planeswalker. If we had those in Pauper, it would prevent all that damage. This one prevents all damage that creatures would deal to players. So creatures can still deal damage to creatures. And I suppose the thought is you're in green, so you have one big guy, maybe, or a couple big guys. And your opponent is maybe going wide, a bunch of tiny 1/1s. Or, whether you're White Weenie or you're red goblin deck or something like that. You're coming in with a ton of little dudes. And so you play something like Chameleon Blur. And then you block. And your big creatures will still kill their little creatures. The ones that can block, or the things that it can block. And then all the other little creatures they have deal no damage to you. So in that way, in that very specific circumstance, it's better than a Fog. Because if you fogged, your creatures wouldn't deal damage to their creatures either. and then they would still keep all their guys, and they could potentially swing again next turn when you don't have this card. That is still a pretty darn specific use case. And I don't think paying 4 times as much as a normal fog, or 2 times as much as a moment's piece, which is a fog that has flashback, I don't think that's worth it. I really don't. No, I'm trying. Gears are turning in my brain, and I'm just coming up with nothing. I think this is just not a particularly great card. I'm going to end up giving it a 1.8. And I think if the effect was 2 mana and it was this, I think I could be swayed into giving it a closer to something like 3 range, maybe even into the mid 3s, but 4 mana. You're asking green to keep up 4 mana? I mean, I guess green has mana, and they could do that, but that seems like a real waste. I don't like that card. Even though I like Time Spiral a lot, I don't like this card. Terramorphic Expanse. How about that? Have we done Terramorphic Expanse? I don't know if we have. I don't even think we've done Evolving Wilds or Escape Route is the Murders of Karlov Manor one that essentially does the same thing, but even slightly more. Man, Terramorphic Expanse is a perfectly fine card, but it's not a Pauper card anymore. It's barely even a Commander card anymore, which is really sad to say. I think Commander we've gotten enough redundant style dual lands and enough redundant style fetch lands that can do a little bit more than Terramorphic Expanse. That might be a little bit more limited in some ways, but better in other ways, like the landscapes from Modern Horizons 3. I think those generally, unless you're playing like a 5-color deck in Commander, 4 or 5-color deck, I would just play those instead. The new Capenna lands that come in and sacrifice themselves, gain you a life, and then you go find a basic land. Like those I'd say are a little better than Terramorphic Expanse if you're playing with only 1 to 3 colors. I think those are better lands if you're looking to fetch. But man, Terramorphic Expanse, what a classic card. What is this originally from? Is it originally from Time Spiral 2? I think it is. And it was before Evolving Wilds. Terramorphic Expanse is the original. We all talk about Evolving Wilds like it's the one, but Terramorphic Expanse was the first one. It's further back than that. Oh, yeah, Time Spiral. There you go. No, these don't count. These Salvats or whatever. And they brought it back in 10th edition. Which Terramorphic Expanse is my favorite? There's a lot of good ones. I actually do really like this new one that's coming out for Strixhaven, or Secrets of Strixhaven. I do really like this Modern Horizons 3 one, which I think is that actually a Phyrexian one? No. This is Eldrazi stuff. So no. This says the Phyrexian. Yeah, I think this is from. Yeah, there you go. Phyrexia LB1. I do really like that one. The Lord of the Rings one is pretty good too. It does look nice. There are a lot of nice ones. But it was just this same one for a very long time, and now they've decided, we can make a bunch of Terramorphic Expanses if we wanted to. So yeah, I think if you gun to my head, I think it's this Phyrexia Albi one. Maybe this Lord of the Rings. The Doctor Who ones. Actually, the art's pretty nice on them. I don't particularly care about Doctor Who that much, but that is all right. And yeah, the Secrets of Strixhaven one's quite all right. I mean, the Edge of Eternities one looks nice too. All right, we're talking a lot about a card that we just need to actually discuss. So we have a fetch land here. Terramorphic Expanse, a land, tap, sacrifice this land, and search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tapped, and shuffled. So, obviously helps you fix. There are reasons that you might want to put lands in your graveyard. Not as many in Pauper, but some, certainly. You can still get more cards in your graveyard to do more things with them. In Commander or Standard or things like that, you have ways of grabbing lands and putting them back from the graveyard into play, and then it's kind of like a guaranteed land every time because you can go continue searching for them. But yeah, in Pauper, that effect is not as necessary. I think this is basically just a mono tap land when you think about it. Now, it can be a mono tap land of any land color that you need, so that's pretty nice. But still, we have so many good dual lands available in Pauper, and also a bunch of bad dual lands. We have so many dual lands that you have to play a deck with a ton of colors for Terramorphic Expanse to start to make sense. And again, even in Pauper, I think that kind of begins at 4 mana or 4 colors. If you are playing 4 or 5 colors, what decks are you doing that with? Slivers, I guess. Maybe elves, like some rainbow elves. But rainbow elves, they have ways of making any color of mana. And it's not that you have to go fetch your mountain or something to be able to cast Breath Weapon or whatever it is Rainbow Elves is casting. Yeah, it's not a Pauper card, and maybe it was at one point, but it certainly isn't now. I'm gonna give this a 2.9 because I do think it's still pretty solid, but it's just not a very good card anymore, especially not for the Pauper format. Armored Armadillo, okay, is a single white mana for a 0/4 Armadillo. It's got Ward 1, and you can also pay 3 and a white to give this creature gets plus X+0 until end of turn, where X is its toughness. So, for 4 mana, and just from a vanilla standpoint, you can turn this thing into a 4/4 for 4 mana, which isn't great. I'm not saying that's an amazing thing to do, but think if there are ways of buffing this guy's toughness. You give this a couple auras or something, or you give this a slagworm armor if you're a Mirrodin fan like I am. That would buff its toughness by 6. So 0/10. Now you're paying 4 mana to turn your 0/10 into a 10/10. That seems a lot better. In Standard, we have seen this see a bit of play in some kind of auras, kind of going for a Bogles deck, but without the real Bogles. Because this guy does have Ward 1, so he's a 1-drop with Ward 1. He's a little harder to kill that way, and then you load him up with auras, and you swing in, and you're doing fine. Or you put the Sheltered by Ghosts on it, so now it has Ward 3. You start to stack the ward on it, it becomes a lot tougher to kill this guy. Problem in Pauper, we just have the Bogles. We already have the Bogles that are pretty cheap, and you just put them out there, and those just end up having hexproof. Now they don't have the way of power boosting this, but you generally are going to take those instead of this. That's for the Bogles deck specifically, though. You do have Mono White Heroic, though, which doesn't necessarily mind a card like this. Those decks I believe have used this card in the past, but I think they have enough good pieces as well of cards that they can just get bigger faster than Armored Armadillo. And again, the Ward 1, while it is something, it makes your opponent's cast down cost 3 instead of 2. That's nice. But I think the trade-off of how slow it can be to start at a 0/4 here is a little different than the heroic guys that can grow very, very quickly. So I'm gonna end up giving this thing like a 4 point. I think I'm just gonna give it a 4. It's a great blocker. A 0/4 on turn 1. If you're playing against a red deck or something, this blocks a lot of stuff from them. Heck, if you're playing kind of any deck, this blocks anything that they're going to play on the first turn or 2, maybe even turn 3. But yeah, in terms of just offensive of getting this to turn around and become a real threat, I just don't think it has the speed to be able to do that, and that's going to lose a couple points out of the deal. All right, we're on to our 10th card of the day, and it is Pounce. 1 and a green for an instant. Target creature you control fights. Target creature you don't control. So hey, this is our chance to go all the way back and look at Monstrous Emergence and see how that stacks up. So this is the same mana cost. This is a fight spell, so it has to be a creature that's on your battlefield. It's also a fight spell in that your creature deals damage to their creature and their creature deals damage to your creature. So it's not like a bite effect that is just your creature dealing the damage to theirs. So in that way, it's a little worse than Monstrous Emergence. But this is instant speed, which is better than Monstrous Emergence. So where do you go? And the real answer is you don't compare this to Monstrous Emergence. You compare this to Ram Through. And we looked at Ram Through earlier as well. Ram Through is a bite effect, instant speed, same mana cost. It is just strictly better than this in pretty much every way, unless you're using like the enrage mechanic or something, which Ixalan did. So if you want your creature to take damage because something happens when they take damage, a fight is better than a bite. But in basically every other scenario, you're going to just want a bite effect over a fight effect. And so this is already on thin ice because it's not as good as Ram Through. And then we have as we said before, there's kind of a question on when you might want to use Ram Through versus when you might want to use Monstrous Emergence. And that just kind of puts this card way down in playability. There's so many other cards you would end up playing before a card like this because you have all those good options available to you. So I'm going to give this a relatively poor score here. I'm going to give this like a 2.3. It is a removal spell, so you do give it some props in that way, but it's also just not particularly great. Let's do a bonus card and then call it a day. It's Shields of Velis Vel, originally from Lorwyn. Single white mana for a Kindred instant shapeshifter. It's got Changeling, which means this instant card, is every creature type. And creatures target player controls gets +0/+1 and gain all creature types until end of turn. All right, so the reason this has a creature type, because it's a kindred spell, or it used to be called a tribal spell, is because you are able to search for certain creature cards. Goblin Matron is able to search for a goblin, and this card is a goblin. It doesn't have to be a goblin creature; it just says search for a goblin, and this is a goblin, even if it's not a goblin creature. It's a goblin instant. It's a fairy instant. It's a Kithkin instant. It's a golem instant. It can be like it's got Changeling. It can be any creature you want. So you can go and search this thing up and just have it in your hand that way. That's pretty good. It's a cool thing that you were able to tutor in that way. It's also an interesting spell. It's not particularly great to give all your creatures +1 toughness at instant speed. Whatever. Maybe it helps you block a couple things. Maybe 1 or 2 of your creatures live that would have died. Fine. The important part here is that it gives all your creatures all creature types. Or, I guess it gives all your opponents... It says target player controls, so you could give all your opponents' creatures a certain creature type, or all creature types, rather. So then it's how many creature type hosers do you have, or for their stuff, or how many creature type buffs do you have for your stuff? Do you have a way of buffing? Elves get +1/+1. All your guys are now elves, even if they weren't elves before. And so now they get that extra bonus. Or, whenever a dinosaur dies, or whenever an insect deals combat damage, any of those potential kind of effects, all your creatures are now those creature types, so they get those effects. Or, if you wanted to do it the other way, it's, goblins get -3, -0, whatever. And all your opponent's creatures are goblins now, so they just won't deal any damage. Or won't deal as much damage. It's a fun card. It requires other cards to make it work. It's a pretty terrible card in a vacuum in that way. But as a person who likes playing around with, I wouldn't call it combo exactly because I did mention I'm not a combo guy, but at least not like a combo that ends the game, but rather like a combo of like, whoa, look at the interaction between these cards. Look at the synergy between these cards. That's really cool. I think a card like Shields of Elisvel is awesome. Not really for Pauper. This is talking more Commander, where you have access to this giant card pool and can smash a bunch of stuff together and make it work. In Pauper, you need a bit more of a focused deck, and I think Shields of Elisvel just isn't a card that's made for that. So in Pauper, pretty bad score. If this was Commander, I'd give this like a niche fun score that would be a lot higher than you might expect. But in Pauper, this gets kind of exactly what you expect, which ends up being like a 1.4 or something. It's pretty bad, and yet also pretty cool. So thanks for joining me on this one, and we will catch you on the next one. See you then.